Now, relations between Nigeria and the United States have soured following U.S. President Donald Trump's threats of military action over alleged Christian killings. The Nigerian government has strongly refuted the allegations. The issue is generating sharp reactions in the West African country. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by David Otto-Endley, who is the Director for Geneva Centre for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. David, thank you very much for joining us. Relations, as we're hearing from this report, between Nigeria and the United States have since soured, this time round over the U.S. military threat over alleged Christian killings in Nigeria. What do you make of this?
Well, again, this is, raising a lot of eyebrows between the Nigerian authorities. President Trump tweeted that, the U.S. would intervene to deal with the security situation. And that, of course, has raised a lot of criticisms from both within and outside Nigeria. I mean, a lot of countries, including China, including Russia, the African Union, as international institutions, ECOWAS, have called for some respect to the integrity and more for dialogue. But I think, this is more or less, it's not the first time that the US, has placed Nigeria as a country of particular concern, meaning that there is some level of severe violation of religious freedoms. It is not, they did that in 2020, but the Biden administration had removed that. But I think it's more or less a significant link to the fact that the Washington administration has, gone from, an unconditional support of counterterrorism. Washington is moving towards, a performance-based engagement. And the accusation, by Washington, towards Nigeria is one that Nigeria has to, take very carefully, considering the fact that, Nigeria is one of the largest recipient of U.S. security assistance. It received about 346 million package from the United States. So it's a major concern, one that Nigeria has to carefully balance between diplomacy, but also in terms of looking towards its own security assistance coming from the US. So it's a very critical state of affairs between Nigeria and the United States at this point in time.
Right, and some Nigerians may see these U.S. statements as interference in domestic affairs. Is this international pressure justified there?
I think on one hand, it depends on how the Nigerian authorities handle this, because specifically the Nigerians are not saying that these killings have not happened. What they are saying is that it's not just Christians that have been killed, that the killing is across religion, is beyond ethnicity. But the crucial thing from a security point is that people have been killed. So perhaps this should be some kind of a wake-up call for the Nigerians to strengthen their performance in terms of avoiding a lot of lack of coordination between security agencies, a weakened civilian engagement. And an issue of leadership at a very strategic level. The question has always been, specifically from Nigerians across the globe, is that the government needs to do more to deal with the level of insecurity. So I think from a Nigerian point, the killings are not acceptable. They do not see this as some kind of a genocide from a religious point. Perhaps a genocide from the fact that Nigerians have been killed by jihadist groups, at large. But they do not see this from the US perspective, that this is a genocide against Christians. But it goes further than that, because, of course, from a diplomatic point, just recently at the United Nations General Assembly, the Nigerians did support and recognize the state of Palestine, which kinds of puts the neutrality of Nigeria into question, and perhaps it could be one of the reasons why Senator Ted Cruz has pushed specifically for Nigeria to be labeled a country of particular concern, and for President Trump, to follow up and say we would, send our troops. But remember, again, this is not the first time that Nigerians have experienced a U.S. military intervention. In 2020, the United States Special Forces actually went into Nigeria to rescue a U.S. citizen. And it was claimed by some Nigerian quarters that this operation was not known to the Nigerian authorities. Although at some point the U.S. did say that they received some support from their Nigerian counterparts. So at a smaller scale, the U.S. has done this before, but I don't think the threats from President Trump, should be taken very seriously based on his antecedents.
Right, and we have, speaking of precedents, we have seen the U.S. president wade into the issue of domestic security in other nations, like he did with South Africa recently. But how do you think these tensions might affect broader relations between the two countries going forward?
It's very unlikely that Nigeria would want to muddy the waters with the United States. I think perhaps what is going to happen is that Nigeria would increase its engagement, perhaps reform its procurement strategy. The United States is it's a huge supplier of weapons to the Nigerian government. Especially when it comes to the war against insurgency. I think they previously sold about 10 Super Tucanos to the Nigerian government. So I think what the Nigerian, government would potentially do is to, as we've seen in recent days, increase its interagency collaboration, increase its level of engagement by dealing with these insurgency groups. That is what I think they should focus on, because of course it's more or less a matter of accountability, because a lot of U.S. senators are asking the big question of, what is all the expenditures that the U.S. is doing? How is that being seen as, what are the positive impacts? So it may not. Nigeria is mature enough in democracy, in diplomacy, not to muddy the waters. They would, want to continue to do business with the United States. They would want to continue to have good relations with the great powers. So I don't think there would be a bigger impact, from that perspective. But I think we would see an increase in the performance of the Nigerians, and also perhaps, to some extent, I think the U.S. would support Nigeria in fighting against the insurgency. But I don't see the U.S. sending troops to Nigeria at any point in time against the will of the Nigerian authorities.